Today we're going over every level of NFL draft bust. We're going over some of the league's biggest disappointments, first round draft picks that didn't live up to expectations, and some busts who were so bad, they had to leave the country just to play the sport again. Let's start with level 1.
Level 1. Disappointing.
This crew is underwhelming. Each level after this will be bigger and bigger draft busts until we reach the worst bust of all time. So to start, we have Reggie Bush. Now I get it. Reggie was billed as a cross between if Barry Sanders and Marshall Faulk had a kid. Though he was definitely a good receiving back, especially for his time, only reaching 1,000 yards twice in his NFL career, making 0 All-Pros and no Pro Bowls, though he did play for 11 seasons, he was just an okay back. So was Leonard Fournette. Coming out of LSU, it was talked as if he was the best prospect since Adrian Peterson coming out of Oklahoma. An absolute mutant on the field, he dominated in college, putting up 1,000 yards as a freshman, then 1,900 yards as a sophomore, and then over 800 yards only playing half the season because of an ankle injury. And to be honest, his first year in the league with Jacksonville in 2017 was a great start. They had Blake Bortles at quarterback, so they really needed Fournette to deliver, and he did. He rushed for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns in just 13 games, helping lead Jacksonville to the AFC Championship. That was his second best season. He got injured the next year and then had a nice bounce back campaign in 2019 with over 1,100 yards and over 500 receiving yards, but that was really it. He had a nice playoff stint with Tampa Bay, getting the nickname Playoff Lenny, but he never got close to 1,000 yards again, and he was out of the league by 2023 at age 28. We also have Kyler Murray here. Kyler was selected with the first overall pick by the Arizona Cardinals in 2019. Murray represents almost everything you want in a number 1 overall pick. At 5'10" and just over 200 pounds, many questioned whether his size would translate to NFL success, and that has definitely played a factor. It seems sometimes he can't see above the line. He's good for 1 week or maybe even a month-long stretch, but is never consistent throughout an entire season. He seemingly always has a nagging issue here or an injury with a hamstring or a foot or maybe a shoulder. But even with that, what makes Murray a successful pick rather than a complete bust was his immediate impact. He won Offensive Rookie in the Year 2019 and made the playoffs in 2021, even though they did lose. He hasn't been a complete whiff, but he also hasn't been great. And the same goes with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor was selected with the first overall pick by the Jacksonville Jags in 2021. Lawrence entered the NFL with perhaps the most hype of any quarterback ever. He was viewed as a generational talent from the first game that he played at Clemson. And he's been good enough to be in the fine category rather than sliding into the bust territory. The challenge with evaluating Lawrence is separating his individual performance from the dysfunction that surrounds him with the Jags. Lawrence's 2022 season showed significant improvement, particularly down the stretch when he helped lead Jacksonville to an unlikely playoff berth and win. But then 2023 happened where he got injured and tried to play through it and kept getting injured. And then 2024 was a complete clown show, with his coach getting fired at the end of the season and it just being really weird. He had a hot start to 2025, but he has seemingly cooled down as of right now, me recording this in week 9. For a bit, it seemed like he had put it all together, and the same goes for Jadeveon Clowney. He was a number 1 overall pick in a loaded 2014 NFL class. The problem with Clowney is they expected him to be the next best pass rusher in the league, at least of his class. Nobody expected Aaron Donald and Khalil Mack to be wildly better than him at that, but they clearly are. At the Combine, Clowney ran a freakish 4.53 40-yard dash, and it seemed like the Texans made the right pick in the draft. But Clowney was just solid for them. He was never truly a bust, always a good run stuffer, and he's been in the league for 12 seasons now, but still has yet to produce 1 double-digit sack season. He's made a few Pro Bowls along the way, which is why he's in this group. Not a completely awful pick by any means, but his peak was never what we thought it would be. These players were still at least solid for some seasons, but the next level is where we get to some backups.
Level 2. Backups.
These were rotational type of players in the NFL, if not just complete backups. Not historically awful like we'll be getting to later in this video, but they were worse than underwhelming. We all like this guy, but it's finally time to admit Justin Fields is not a good NFL player. Justin Fields, selected with the 11th overall pick by the Chicago Bears in 2021, his passing stats weren't spectacular during his time in Chicago. He did show some dual threat ability with his legs, but that came with him fumbling 38 times in 40 games and having an 11-29 record as a starter. But we gave him a pass for that because in Chicago, their history of QBs is not good, and that's going with Caleb Williams right now as well. But then he went to Pittsburgh and had a winning record, even though he had just over 1,000 passing yards in 6 games and 5 touchdowns. Then he got a contract with the Jets, and now it's proven, having a net negative game, that he's just not good. Someone who I loved coming out of college was Tavon Austin. You couldn't have told me he wouldn't have been a star, a Baltimore legend at that. The college mixtape with him and Geno Smith was all I needed to see. But as I got older, I realized, hey, maybe a 5'8", 180-pound receiver with okay hands was never going to be a star. Tavon only recorded 500 yards once and had the same number of seasons under 50 receiving yards at 2 that he does with over 450 at 2. He's still a legend though, and so I don't really care. You have another receiver like Corey Davis here as well. Drafted 5th overall in 2017, he was expected to be the player A.J. Brown eventually became for them. 6'3", over 200 pounds, the Titans thought they had found their wide receiver 1. Turned out he was best fit for a wide receiver 2 role, but probably even a wide receiver 3. He wound up playing 6 seasons in the NFL. In his best years, he did put up over 800 yards and 900 yards respectively, but still was a rotational wide receiver at best, and it only got worse when he went to the Jets. You also have Devin White here, taken 5th overall by the Tampa Bay Bucks. He had a higher peak than the others so far in this group, having a good 2020 campaign, making 2nd team All-Pro, and in 2021, he was a Pro Bowler. But he was never the lead guy of that linebacking core with Levante David, and after trying to go out on his own, it really hasn't hit. Another linebacker here is A.J. Hawk. He was on some great Packers team in the mid to late 2000s and early 2010s. He won a Super Bowl with Rodgers, but being taken 5th overall in a mid at best 2006 class, you were hoping for more. He became a rotational piece for them, made a Pro Bowl, but was never a high caliber starter that you couldn't replace. Same goes with Vic Beasley. Vic Beasley really seemed like he was going to be a hit for the Falcons. Drafting him 8th overall in the 2015 class, it seemed as though after 2016 with 15.5 sacks, he'd be the next John Abraham for them. But he quickly fell back down to earth his next few seasons in the league. He'd spend his next few seasons as a rotational edge, never quite living up to that magic he had before, and never getting double-digit sacks again. To round out this group, you have LaRon Landry. Taken 6th overall in the 2007 NFL Draft, he was able to make a Pro Bowl in 2012 with the Jets, and even though he did start a lot of his career, I find it hard to believe it wasn't because he was juicing out of his mind. He was a great weight room warrior, but a below average safety, and especially for being taken 6th overall, you'd expect a lot more. Level 3, we actually start getting to some busts.
Level 3, busts.
These guys were just bad first round picks. They weren't even passable or fine or backups. They were busts. Blake Bortles, selected 3rd overall by the Jacksonville Jags in 2014, definitely has to start out this tier. He lasted long enough to fool people into thinking he wasn't a complete failure, but his numbers tell the brutal truth. Over 6 seasons, he compiled a pathetic 24-49 record as a starter, with a 59% completion percentage and more interceptions, 75, than you'd want from a franchise QB. His 103 total touchdowns over 6 years averages out to about 17 per season. It's just not good enough for a 3rd overall pick. Darius Hayward-Bay was the 7th overall pick in the 2009 NFL Draft by the Oakland Raiders. He was the first receiver taken in a class that had Jeremy Maclin, Michael Crabtree, and Percy Harvin taken after him. In his first season, he only played 11 games and recorded 124 yards and 1 touchdown. He was never close to being wide receiver 1 caliber, getting close to 1,000 yards in year 3, but even then he didn't hit it and only hit 5 touchdowns once in his career. It's early, but I think we know about Emmanuel Forbes. Not just because he got baptized by fire with A.J. Brown in 2023, but because he never truly recovered. Drafted in 2023 by the Commanders with the 16th overall pick, 1 slot before Christian Gonzalez, it was a surprising draft selection to say the least. He rose up during the combine and draft process. Coming out of Mississippi State, he was a good ball skill corner, collecting 6 pick sixes in college. But truth be told, that really doesn't matter if you're never close to the ball in the NFL. It just wasn't a good selection. Neither was Tim Couch, selected with the 1st overall pick by the Cleveland Browns in 1999. Couch's 22-37 record as a starter over 5 seasons is brutal enough. But what makes him really a bust is that he was the number 1 overall pick, who was supposed to lead Cleveland's return to the NFL. Instead, he really became a symbol of the franchise's continued dysfunction and inability to develop talent. Kadarius Toney was selected with the 20th overall pick by the New York Giants in 2021. After the Eagles traded up to take Devonta Smith, it was clear they completely forced the Giants to switch gears and get the shiftiest college receiver. The only problem was he wasn't very good at receiving the football. He was amazing at dropping passes or getting tackled behind the line trying to make a defender miss. He was taken to explode the Giants' offense with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. But that didn't happen, and he was traded to the Kansas City Chiefs in his 2nd year. He does hold the longest punt return in Super Bowl history, but still an overall miss. Someone else who was a miss was Isaiah Simmons. Drafted with the 8th overall pick by the Arizona Cardinals in 2020, he looked as if he was a tweener, in that he could play any position because he didn't have a specific role. But there's a difference between being positionless, like Kyle Hamilton, and not having a position. Isaiah Simmons was a latter. Someone who rarely gets talked about is Greg Robinson for some reason. Greg Robinson was taken with the 2nd overall pick by the St. Louis Rams, and he wasn't very good at all. It didn't take long to realize he wasn't ready for the NFL. He was a massive player at 6'5", 330 pounds, but that was it. He didn't have the footwork, technique, or quickness needed to play offensive tackle at the highest level. He would average 11.5 penalties through his first 3 seasons in the league, many of which being holding, showing his lack of technique or false start, making him jump early to make up for his lack of quickness. Luke Joeckel was also taken just a year earlier in the 2013 draft with the 2nd overall pick. The Jags were potentially calling him the next baby Boselli, but that didn't work out, and Luke was out of the league after 2017 at just 26 years old. And lastly, to round out this group, we have Kenny Pickett, selected 20th overall by the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2022. It must have been that slide that got him drafted. He was a solid QB at Pitt, throwing to Jordan Addison a lot, but he was never going to light up the NFL. He was too small, hands included, had good mobility, but was never super quick, and didn't have the arm required to play in a place like Pittsburgh. It didn't help that Matt Canada was his OC, but he didn't live up to expectations. These guys are all draft busts, but they're not all hated by the city like the next group.
Level 4, City hates you.
These guys weren't backups, they weren't just busts. They're not allowed to show their face in the city again. And to start, we have Jalen Reagor. Jalen Reagor was drafted with the 21st overall pick by the Philadelphia Eagles in the 2020 NFL draft class. He was taken just 1 pick ahead of future Hall of Famer Justin Jefferson. He had a really high drop rate at TCU, but it was mostly blamed on bad quarterback play instead of Jalen. However, it seemed to be a problem for Jalen as well. He missed the first few games of the 2020 season with a hamstring injury, and for a quick wide receiver, those are always tricky. He did catch a bomb from Carson Wentz, his only career highlight during that season. The problem is that he got 396 yards that season, which isn't good, but plenty of great wide receivers take time to develop in their rookie season. However, that didn't happen for Jalen. That was his best year, posting worse and worse stats every year afterward. He's currently out of the league and never allowed back in Philly. Sticking in the NFC East, we have Taco Charlton. It wasn't that he was just bad, it was who he was drafted over. He was drafted 2 picks over TJ Watt, 100 plus sacks, future Hall of Famer, TJ Watt. Even when it happened, people couldn't believe he was drafted right where he was. At 6'6", 270 pounds, he had the physical tools to dominate in the NFL, but he didn't, and we all knew it was a miss right away. When he played in all 16 games but didn't start in any of them, it was a cause for concern. Having just 3 sacks, again like Reagor, plenty of great players blossom after their rookie season, but again like Reagor, that wasn't the case. Saying his name still hits hard for Cowboys fans. Switching over to the NFC West, we have Josh Rosen. For the 22 Cardinals fans out there, this name still hurts. Josh Rosen selected 10th overall by the Arizona Cardinals in the historic 2018 QB class. A class that had Lamar, Josh Allen, Baker, and Sam Darnold. The Cardinals got the worst one and the most cocky. Rosen's career is a masterclass in how quickly things can go wrong for a highly drafted quarterback. His 3-13 record as a starter tells you everything you really need to know about his impact on winning games. With a 54% completion percentage and nearly twice as many interceptions, 21, as touchdowns, Rosen never showed he belonged as an NFL starter. Cincinnati still hates John Ross with a passion. I don't blame them. There were signs though. In his combine, when he got injured after running the 40-yard dash, people probably should have taken notice. He did have a really amazing Madden 17 combine card though. He was an absolute cheat code. But in real life, at 5'11", 190 pounds, I think we should have came to terms that this probably shouldn't be a top 9 pick in the NFL draft. His career total for receiving yards was 963 with 11 touchdowns. He played on 3 teams in 6 seasons, but never really lived up to the hype at all. The Raiders franchise has been through a lot. There's a decent amount of players I probably could have chose from, but I think I'll go with Alex Leatherwood. Immediately after picking him in the first round, everyone knew that pick was not going to work out. He was projected to be a 3rd round-ish pick, and the Raiders took him in the first for vibes, I guess. Maybe it was because he was from Alabama, and then realizing he was from Alabama, the GM just turned off his brain after that. Leatherwood started all 17 games in his rookie campaign, but picked up 11 penalties in that season. He would only play 1 more year in the league in 2022 with the Chicago Bears, not starting in any of those games. And lastly, to round out this group, we have Ray Caruth. Taken with the 27th overall pick in the 1997 NFL Draft, he's one of the worst picks of all time. Not just for his on-the-field play, which was awful, he also attempted to flee the scene of a crime. But he was finally caught and sentenced to prison for 18 years for offing his then-girlfriend pregnant with their child. He's rightfully hated. Next up in level 5, we have franchise-altering draft busts, including one of the most recognizable flameouts of all time.
Level 5. Franchise altering.
These draft busts change the scope of entire franchises. To start, we have a combo. What the Tennessee Titans were cooking up in the early 2020s, I have absolutely no idea. After upsetting the one-seeded Ravens in 2019 and having a bunch of positive momentum, they would then draft the worst pick possibly of all time, Isaiah Wilson out of Georgia. He played just one game in the NFL, wasn't very good, got toxic with the locker room, and was eventually cut. But that wasn't it. The Titans GM would then 2 years later trade away their best wide receiver to the Eagles in A.J. Brown, and then use that draft pick on another bust in Treylon Burks. A.J. Brown has gone on to be vital in 2 Super Bowl appearances, winning one of them and having 3 all-pro caliber seasons in Philly. Treylon Burks has played a total of 27 games since 2022. The reason these are franchise-altering is the Titans originally were so comfortable taking Isaiah Wilson, they let Jack Conklin walk in free agency. And their O-line has been in shambles ever since. And the A.J. Brown trade immediately made their coach turn heel, ultimately leading to a power struggle with the GM. The coach then got fired. The GM then got fired for making the decision. And since, Mike Vrabel, the coach, has gone on to the Patriots, who's currently, as I'm making this video, leading the division. And I just want to thank John Robinson, personally, for helping out the Eagles. I owe you one. Someone who I almost put in the level below was J.P. Lossman, but he honestly set the Bills franchise back too much to not put in this level. In the SAC 2004 QB draft class that featured Eli Manning, Big Ben, and Phillip Rivers in the first round, the Bills somehow got J.P. Lossman. But he didn't fall to them. Oh no. The Bills originally had the 13th overall pick and decided to use that on wide receiver Lee Evans. Evans had a solid, productive 8-year career in the league, but then the Bills remembered, oh yeah, they don't have a quarterback to throw Lee the ball, so they traded back up to the first round, trading their 2005 first round pick, their 2004 second and fifth round pick to take J.P. Lossman. It's not an exact science doing the name test, but sometimes I like to say a name out loud just to see if I think they'll be good in the league, and J.P. Lossman does not pass the test. He sounds like he made third partner at some firm in Nebraska. But anyway, J.P. Lossman started just 33 games from 2004 to 2011, throwing for more interceptions 34 than total touchdowns at 33, and setting the Bills back another 5 years. In 1989, there were 4 Hall of Famers taken within the first 5 picks: Troy Aikman, Barry Sanders, Derek Thomas, and Deion Sanders. The only player taken in the top 5 who was not a Hall of Famer, Tony Mandarich. Taken with the 2nd overall pick in the NFL draft by the Packers, he became a poster child of draft busts. He completely flamed out with the Packers within 3 years, had steroid issues, and then came back and played decently for the Colts from 1996 to 1998. However, the reason this is franchise altering is because of who they missed out on. Obviously, Troy Aikman was already gone, but Barry Sanders, Derek Thomas, or Deion Sanders could have brought the Packers back over the hump before Favre in the 90s. Derek Thomas could have paired with Tim Harris, who had multiple 13-plus sack seasons, or Deion Sanders to help shape the back end of the defense. Of course, respect to Keith Woodside, but he's no Barry Sanders. Of course, we have Draft Day, Johnny Manziel. Now, you can argue the Browns were bad before Johnny Football, and bad since, but he definitely made them more of a laughingstock. Johnny Manziel was selected with the 22nd overall pick by the Cleveland Browns in 2014. Manziel represented one of the most spectacular flameouts in NFL history. His 2-6 record as a starter barely scratches the surface of how catastrophic this pick was for Cleveland. With just over 1,600 passing yards and 7 touchdowns over 2 seasons, his on-field production was pathetic, but it was his off-field behavior that made him a legendary bust. He spent more time partying than studying film, showed up to practice hungover, and was out of the league within 2 years. The man had to leave the country and go to the CFL in Canada in order to try and make an NFL comeback. But that didn't work. Paxton Lynch was selected with the 26th overall pick by the Broncos in 2016. Lynch's 1-3 record as a starter and 792 career passing yards over just 2 seasons makes him one of the most spectacularly early exits for a first-round quarterback. What makes Lynch particularly damaging is that Denver traded up to get him, giving up additional draft capital for a player who couldn't even compete as a starting job. His 61% completion percentage might look decent-ish, kinda, but Lynch played in just 5 games over 2 seasons. The Broncos quickly realized they had made a massive mistake. For a team that had just won a Super Bowl and needed competent QB play to remain competitive, Lynch was unable to do that. Anthony Richardson deserves special nod here as well. Now, I liked him coming out of college, but being taken top 4 with like 8 college starts to your name, we really should have seen the red flags. He was always supposed to be a project, but when you're dirting passes 6 yards away and then throwing the most amazing deep ball we've ever seen, only for you to end up with 146 total yards of offense and you leave early with an injury, it's just not sustainable. The Colts were so bad with Richardson, it looked like everybody was about to get fired. And then they had to bring in Daniel Jones, who actually turned out to be their savior. We can't forget, lastly, about N'Keal Harry. Drafted 32nd overall by the New England Patriots, Harry single-handedly ended the greatest dynasty in all of sports history. Okay, that's a bit of a stretch, but he totaled just over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns in 5 seasons, playing on 3 different rosters in that time. He may not have ended the dynasty, but he definitely didn't help continue it. In level 6, we get to some historic misses.
Level 6, historic misses.
These guys are legendarily bad, and so we have Zach Wilson, selected 2nd overall by the New York Jets in 2021. Wilson's 12-21 record as a starter tells the complete story of a draft failure. What makes Wilson historically bad is his combination of poor decision-making and inability to handle pressure, also lack of accountability. When you watched him, you really hated watching the Jets, and nobody ever likes watching the Jets, but you really hated watching the Jets with Zach Wilson. Achilles Smith, selected 3rd overall by the Cincinnati Bengals in 1999, has to be here as well. Smith's 3-14 record as a starter over 4 seasons shows that he was just a draft bust. He had just over 2,200 career passing yards and 5 touchdowns against 13 interceptions, showing he was just unprepared for NFL football, despite being a top 3 pick. Speaking of the AFC North, we have another missing Courtney Brown, taken with the 1st overall pick in 2000 by the Cleveland Browns. He had the nickname the Quiet Storm, and quiet is right. His first season, he did have a decent rookie year, 4.5 sacks, and came 4th in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting. But in year 2, he got injured and only played 5 games. After that, he consistently struggled to stay on the field. He never played a full season again, though he did have 6 sacks in 2003. For the literal number 1 overall pick, you need a lot more production. You have another D lineman in Steve Entman, also taken with the 1st overall pick in the draft, this time in 1992 by the Colts. He lasted 6 seasons in the league, but didn't get a second contract with the Colts. Only recorded 3 sacks or more once in his career, his rookie season, and played on 3 different teams. Entman's struggles in the NFL were mostly due to injuries, including a torn patella tendon during his 2nd year with the team. It seemed as though he never fully recovered from that injury, and he was gone by the end of 1997. Heath Shuler was drafted 3rd overall, right behind Marshall Faulk in the 1994 draft. Shuler was supposed to keep Washington in title contention, as they largely had been for the previous 15 years, winning their last Super Bowl in 1992, just a few years before this draft pick. However, Shuler proved out to be one of the bigger busts of the decade, starting 13 games across 3 seasons while getting outplayed by the 7th round pick, Gus Frerotte. Shuler ended up with the Saints in 97, and that was where his career ended. We also can't forget about Clelin Ferrell. The Raiders took him 4th overall in 2019, and this dude was so mediocre, the Raiders fans were calling for his head after just 2 seasons. He finished with just 17 sacks over 6 seasons, barely 3 sacks a year for a top 5 pick. The Raiders were so desperate to move on, they just let him walk in free agency, and he's been a journeyman ever since. David Carr, the Houston Texans' first ever draft pick in 2002, has to be here. He was truly a historic miss. I wouldn't say it was all his fault by any means. The Texans fielded what many consider potentially the worst offensive line in NFL history during his tenure. Carr was sacked a record 76 times in his rookie season alone, a number that still haunts QBs to this day. He stuck around as a backup for many years, so his counting stats aren't terrible, but for anyone who saw him, just knows it was a mistake. Andre Ware, selected with the 7th overall pick by the Detroit Lions in 1990, Ware's 5-8 record as a starter and over 1,100 passing yards over 4 seasons makes him one of the biggest busts of the 90s. Despite winning the Heisman Trophy, he never translated his college success to professional level. His inability to adapt from a college spread offense to the NFL complexity showed really the dangers of drafting a dual threat QB back in the 90s. Justin Blackmon was a 5th overall pick by the Jacksonville Jags in 2012. Though he had some real promise in his rookie campaign, posting 5 touchdowns and 865 yards, his career fizzled out pretty quickly. He was already getting in trouble in college for off-the-field issues, and unfortunately, it only worsened once he got in the NFL. The Jags originally had the 7th overall pick in the draft, but traded out to 5th for Blackmon. After his rookie season, Blackmon only played 4 games in 2013 and hasn't played since. fighting too many demons off the field. Todd Marinovich deserves a shout as well. Drafted with the 24th overall pick by the Raiders in 1991, he had been hyped up since practically birth. His father was a failed football star due to an injury, and so he essentially built his son into the machine he never was. Unfortunately for Todd, it was too much. As soon as he got a touch of freedom, it overwhelmed him. He would only last until 1992, playing in a total of 8 games and having more interceptions than touchdowns. Sadly, his post-career has been even worse. Matt Leinart, selected with the 10th overall pick with the Arizona Cardinals in 2006, never gets talked about for some reason. He had just over 4,000 yards and 15 touchdowns, representing really minimal production for a top 10 pick. And despite his success at USC, Leinart couldn't handle NFL speed and complexity. His quick fall from starter to backup out of the league demonstrates how thoroughly he failed to justify his draft position. And Justin Gilbert may have been the worst cornerback I've ever seen. Gilbert was a top 8 pick in the 2014 draft and was supposed to be a lockdown corner. Instead, he played only 23 games over 2 years for the Browns and then was traded to Pittsburgh, where he lasted just 1 season. Out of the league by 25. No major injuries, just bad play and a worse attitude. Getting called out by Joe Thomas, who has never said a bad word about anybody. Just a historically bad draft for the Browns. In level 7, we get to the biggest busts of all time.
Level 7, the biggest busts.
These are the biggest busts ever, and they're 9. Trey Lance, Charles Rogers, Vernon Gholston, Kevin White, Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell, Dan McGuire, and Art Schlichter. Art Schlichter, selected with the 4th overall pick by the Baltimore Colts in 1982, really has to be here. Schlichter's 0-6 record as a starter and 45% completion percentage over just 13 games tells only part of his historic disaster. What makes him the ultimate bust isn't just his terrible on-field performance, it's that his gambling addiction made him completely unreliable as a professional athlete. He claims he only bet on other teams, but I mean, come on. Ultimately getting suspended for his gambling. We also have Vernon Gholston here. The Jets made this dude the 6th overall pick in 2008, thinking they found their elite pass rusher. What they got instead was a walking disaster who recorded exactly 0 sacks, the same as you and me, in his entire NFL career. In 3 seasons with New York, Gholston managed just 42 tackles across 45 games. Just unacceptable production for a top 10 pick. Ryan Leaf, selected 2nd overall by the San Diego Chargers in 1998, has to be here as well. The Colts really made the right decision with Peyton Manning at the number 1 overall pick, and it didn't take long for everybody to know it. Leaf's 4-17 record as a starter and 48% completion percentage over just 25 games makes him synonymous with draft failure. He just had over 3,600 passing yards and 14 touchdowns against 36 interceptions, showing he was just completely overwhelmed by NFL football. Throwing tantrums in the locker room and on the field, he just wasn't good enough to do that. Charles Rogers was supposed to be the future for the Detroit Lions. He was infamously taken with the 2nd overall pick in the 2003 draft, 1 pick ahead of future Hall of Famer Andre Johnson. Breaking his clavicle in practice and being sidelined for the year after just 5 starts in his rookie campaign didn't help at all. In the season opener the next year, he had broken another clavicle, costing him another season. In 2005, he was suspended for 4 games due to substance abuse violations. After his return, he played 9 games where he caught 14 passes for 197 yards and a touchdown, but he was cut by the Lions prior to the 06 season. Kevin White may even be worse. Even though he technically played 3 more seasons, he actually started in 1 less game than Charles Rogers, only starting in 8. Kevin White was drafted with the 7th overall pick in the 2015 draft class. White finished with just 397 receiving yards and the same amount of touchdowns as you and me. I'm not joking. He played 6 seasons, started 8 games, played in 30 total, and has the same touchdowns as me. There was a Reddit post once he was drafted saying he would be injury prone because of the way he runs. The dude got clowned all the way through that post, but he was completely right. Dan McGuire, selected with the 16th overall pick by the Seattle Seahawks in 91, has to be here as well. He recorded just a 2-3 record as a starter, and a 50% completion percentage over just 13 games represents a complete waste of a 1st round pick. He had just over 745 career passing yards and 2 touchdowns against 6 interceptions. He just was never close to being NFL ready. And the same goes with Trey Lance. Selected 3rd overall by the San Francisco 49ers in 2021, Lance's 2-3 record as a starter and 56% completion percentage over just 12 games total played represents a modern disaster for a top 3 pick. He had just over 1,000 yards career passing and 5 touchdowns. It's just not good enough. The 49ers gave up immense draft capital, trading multiple 1st round picks for him, and they would have been screwed if not for Brock Purdy. And lastly, the most infamous, Jamarcus Russell. Selected first overall by the Oakland Raiders in 2007, Russell's 7-18 record as a starter and 52% completion percentage over 3 seasons represents a catastrophic failure for the #1 overall pick. He had just over 4,000 career passing yards and 18 touchdowns against 23 interceptions, showing he never developed as a quarterback. What makes Russell's bust status legendary is his complete lack of work ethic and professionalism. Reports of him not studying, showing up completely out of shape, and lacking basic football knowledge made him a symbol of wasted talent and poor character evaluation. The Raiders gave Russell a massive contract as the #1 overall pick, making his failure even more damaging. And so there you have it, the 7 levels of NFL draft busts. Thanks for watching.